Thank you. This is the Port Commission report, exciting report. And we go around the table, starting with you, Ms. Tucker.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Bill Evans.
Jennifer Johnson.
Jim Steele.
Patrick Flynn.
Pete Peterson.
Dick Training.
George McHale's.
Todd Coles.
Andrew Chalmers.
And will there be any other presenters?
Yes,
there will.
2 others.
And as they come forward, they'll introduce themselves. Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, thank you very much for allowing this time for us. I know that the Enterprise Committee, as well as other Assembly members, have been receiving the briefings on a monthly basis, given the status report and an update as to where we are on the project to include schedule. And if you remember from the last briefing that you received on the schedule, it did show that the Assembly as a whole would be briefed on the concept that's been approved by the mayor to go forward with. And that's why we're here today. To assist in that endeavor, you have a couple of the documents that you should have in front of you. There's a press release, and then there's also a copy of the slides of the presentation that you'll receive today. There'll be numerous presenters today, primarily Todd Coles, our engineer at the port, as well as 2 individuals representing the contract team that we have on board to assist us in the project management of this project. And those are representatives from CH2. So with that,
For
yes.
1 minute, Mr. Bowski has just joined us.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to turn the rest of the briefing over to Todd. We'll entertain questions as they arise. I think that would be easier for you and probably be easier for everybody else to follow in that manner. So with that, Todd.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Assembly. Again, my name is Todd Coles. I'm the Port Engineer with the Port of Anchorage. Joining me today and helping with the presentation is Mr. Lon Elledge. Lon is the project manager for the CH2M Hill project management team. And next to Lon is Mr. Doug Plater. Doug Plater is the design lead for the team. So over the last 5 months, CH2M Hill and HDR, our project management consultant team, have been working on a concept design study for the Anchorage Port Modernization Project. The study concludes early next month with publication of the final summary report, but we are in a position today to brief you on a very important milestone, the selection of the concept plan for the project. So the presentation today will provide an overview of the concept design process and some of the details of the concept plan. Outline of the presentation, we're going to recap the concept planning charrette that really started the process with the interaction of our key stakeholders. We're going to overview the 3 concepts that came out of the charrette and were developed to a 15% design level. We're going to talk about the concept evaluation committee process, where those 15% concepts were evaluated by a committee of stakeholders to arrive at the selected concept. We're going to describe the attributes of the selected concept and then lay out the project path moving forward over the next couple of years. So beginning with the concept planning charrette, we started the charrette, we pulled together a number of stakeholders for the project. I think there were over 50 in attendance. And we started that workshop with a statement of the project goals. And first and foremost, replacement of Terminal 2 and 3, where Horizon and Tote arrive and depart, was paramount. And minimizing, while doing that, minimizing the investment in the north end of the project. The idea being putting the monies that we have to best first use. We want to do that in a way that provides new, modern, safe, and efficient facilities. We're focusing on our existing businesses, but allowing for future growth in those businesses. The project life cycle is 75 years, so we certainly don't want to have to adjust for any major changes early in that life. So the plan would be to support larger vessels and allowing for deeper draft vessels. So the organizations represented at the charrette, the municipality of Anchorage, we had a number of key departments that will be participating as the project moves forward, from purchasing to project management and engineering assistance at times. We also had representatives from the Geotechnical Advisory Commission. We had 2 commissioners who attended the charrette. We had all the key folks at the port. We had Totem Ocean Trailer Express and Horizon Lines, the key stakeholders at Terminals 2 and 3. We also had ABI, Alaska Basic Industries, the cement operator at the port. We did envision that they might be impacted during some of the phasing, so we wanted to make sure they were participating. We had the Southwest Alaska Pilots Association and Cook Inlet Tug and Barge, providing that water side expertise that's so important on the navigational side. We also had representatives from the Corps of Engineers Alaska District. They provide the maintenance dredging at the port, and so their participation was very important. And because the port has the intermodal connectivity with the railroad, we certainly wanted the Alaska Railroad there as well. So all of these key stakeholders met with the project team, and we started the project with some baseline concepts so that everybody could start, from moving forward with some ideas. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Doug Plater, who's going to walk us through those baseline concepts and then ultimately how they developed post-charrette.
Thank you, Todd. I'm going to show you essentially 2 sets of slides, kind of what we had when we went into the start of the charrette, which is this set. And after this, I will show you what we came out with some visualizations that you're looking at right now. It was really important, as Todd said, that we maximize the dollars into the existing terminals for Toad and Horizon. That's kind of a fault of the previous project. And we want, so this one's focused on the new terminals, or the existing tenants, excuse me. And there's 4, we started out with 4, and this is the first one, Concept A. And what we did here was we essentially just replaced Terminal 2 and 3 in their existing location. And we also cut back the north extension. It's cut back several hundred feet here to get it back to a stable condition. And we're not putting any kind of berths out here. It's just cutting it back to a shorter wall. So we're maintaining some uplands, but we're not putting a berth out in this area. One of the reasons we have to do that is we're getting sedimentation right in here right now for Toad. Last winter there was emergency dredging that had to be done. And so by cutting this back, we're going to get better water flow through here. And that's going to decrease the sedimentation and improve navigability for Toad. One other thing we want to do is, as Todd said, we want to get it ready for future growth, bigger ships. And so we'll have to, in this alternative, we'd have to dredge here down to -45 in the future. And because of that, we'll have to dredge in this construction, dredge back and put a wall in here to get down deep enough. So that's one of the things in Concept A that contributes to the cost. Concept B, if you look here now at the terminals 2 and 3, we're again replacing them, but we've moved them offshore 140 feet. Right, that distance right there is about 140 feet from the existing berth line here at Terminal 1 to the new berth line at Terminals 2 and 3. And what that does is it gets the berths in deeper water, makes it easier to dredge. It also makes it easier to go to larger ships with deeper draft in the future. The north extension again is cut back to improve flow. Concept C is just kind of a further continuation of Concept B. Everything is the same. Terminals 2 and 3 have moved out. We've cut back the north extension, but except that we've taken care of the 2 berth lines by putting a new POL 1 in out on the same berth line, 140 feet out, and we've also extended POL 2 out to the same berth line. Concept D is a variation. The biggest difference here is we've shifted everything south. We've put a brand new POL terminal right here, south of the existing. And this is primarily going to be used by the cement, ABI, and it lines up very well with their upland operations are right here, so it lines up very well. It'll produce their piping, so it's another instance where we try to pay attention to the existing customers' needs. We've shifted Horizon was here in Terminal 2. We've shifted them to Terminal 1. Tote was in Terminal 3, and we've shifted them to Terminal 2. And we've also moved them out 140 feet. And what you'll see in the next set of slides, that really facilitates the phasing of the project. So now I'm going to take you.
Excuse me one second. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering, on concept D, if you move out that far, is it going to be possible for a cruise ship someday possibly to
Oh,
hook
absolutely.
up to the...
Absolutely, it has really no effect on that.
So we're out where the water's deep enough that they'll be able to dock up?
Absolutely. We're in deeper water, so all navigability for all ships into the berths, whether it's cruise, oil, container, it's going to be easier in the deeper water.
We've got 9 coming next year at the existing dock, so even in the shallower water, we're getting cruise ships.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the 4 concepts. We had a couple small variations of those, but coming out of the charrette, we wanted to get down to 3 to carry the 15%. And so we wanted to eliminate 1. And so what we came up with, after a lot of discussion with all the stakeholders that Todd mentioned, Tote Horizon, et cetera, was that concepts A, C, and D would be carried forward, and we dropped B. And I've got a blow up of B right here. And the reason we dropped it is you've got 2 different berth lines. Terminals 2 and 3 are 140 feet out. Terminal 1 stays put. So in this area right here, be difficult to dredge, and would also track a lot of ice buildup in the wintertime, making it hard to get into Terminal 1 and POL 1. So this alternative was dropped, and we will talk about it further. So now we're going to go into the visualizations. These are some of the nicer graphics that you're looking at that we've been able to work on since the charrette. And the reason we did these was just kind of twofold. You know, this port is a major operational hub of this community and the state, really, and it can't go down at all. So we had to, when we put forth an option, we had to make sure we could keep the port open the whole time through construction. And we also wanted to, and we had to convince Tote and Horizon of that as well, and they were part of these discussions. So I'm going to, and it also helps us as designers see what has to happen. So I'm going to step you through those. So this is concept A, existing. In the first phase, we would cut back and stabilize the north extension. Now you'll notice this angle is cut back a little steeper than we had in the concept, and that's a refinement that we made in the preliminary design so that we could get better water flow through here, so we wouldn't have as much sedimentation for Terminal 3, because we're not moving them out in this one. The other thing we would do in phase 1 is a new port admin building would be constructed up in the backlands, and we would demolish the existing port admin building to make way for the construction to continue. In the next phase, we would construct a brand new notice the cement ship has moved over here to POL 2, and we're going to construct a brand new Terminal 1. Next phase, we're going to construct a brand new Terminal 2. You'll notice the little blue ramps there. Those are temporary ramps that Tote will need, because Tote needs 3 ramps, and Tote's going to move into this berth in the next phase. So now there's Tote in Terminal 2, and now we can construct a brand new Terminal 3. This is the completed phase. We put Tote back where they belong in Terminal 3. Horizon's in Terminal 2, and I want you to notice that we put the container trains in this view. They would assume to be in all the views, but we just, to minimize the graphic preparation, we just did it in one. We also narrowed the wharf here. You may have noticed initially it was 120 feet wide, and that was for 100 gauge trains. One of the value engineering propositions that we came up with during the design charrette was to narrow it to 50 gauge trains. So the footprint of the crane goes from 100 feet to 50 feet. And 50 feet is, a 50-foot crane is good enough to last the next 75 years, and it saves some costs on crane, and it saves a considerable amount on the wharf, because your wharf is now 50, instead of 120 feet wide, it's only 70 feet wide. So it's a cost-saving measure, and we think it's a good one. Here's just another view from the west of the same concept A. So I'm going to go to concept C. Again, you saw this already, it's existing condition. Same, the first phase is exactly the same, except the cutback of the north extension is not as much as concept A, and so we can preserve more of the backlands. And the reason we can do that is because we're eventually going to be moving the berth line out into this area. And you'll see that in the slides. So in this case, we're not going to rebuild a new Terminal 1. but we're going to retrofit it. We need to retrofit it so that we can get Horizon to shift down into it so we can work on terminals 2 and 3. And so retrofitting is some of the jacketing of the piles that you've been doing over the years, just to make it strong enough to support Horizon's operations for several years during construction. We're going to do the same thing with Terminal 2, because we're going to have to shift tote into Terminal 2 in this situation. You'll notice the blue ramps are, again, temporary ramps for tote because of their three-ramp operation. And now we can start actually doing some real work, permanent work, and that's what's shifting new Terminal 3 is pushed out 140 feet, and that 140 feet is measured from the face of that berth there to the face of the berth here. So that's tote's new berth, and now we can kind of shift everybody back one at a time here. So now, tote now shifted back into Terminal 3, and we construct a brand new Terminal 2 for Horizon, and then we can slide Horizon into their berth at Terminal 2, and now we can replace a new POL1. And that's the reason we only did a retrofit of Terminal 1 initially is because we were going to replace it with this new POL1, and then we've got new POL2 as well. So there's your completed concept C. 2 new container berths, 1 brand new POL berth, and then this little piece of trestle here is existing, but everything out from there is new. Here's just another view from the west. Now I'm going to move on to concept D. Again, it starts out, you've seen that one before. Start of concept D, it's the same except for one thing. So you've got the cutback of the north extension, you've got the new port admin, you've got to demolish the existing admin, but you've got a brand new POL1 here down south of POL2. And again, that's the one that lines up, that's ABI's cement operation right there. It's the one that they can use. It'll improve the efficiency of their operation. And what it does very nicely is it allows the cement ship to move there, which frees up Terminal 1 completely, and we can put Terminal 1 right out in its permanent configuration. So in one step, we can build a brand new Terminal 1 and get it ready for Horizon. One other thing, by moving Horizon to Terminal 1, we have a little bit of backland work to do. We need to give them some additional backlands, and there's a fill, a narrow, small fill that's about 2.5 acres right here. We would fill that in with material from the north extension that we're going to be taking out. It's essentially free material, very, very cost-effective way to grab a couple acres right there. In the next phase, we would reconstruct Terminal 2, the majority of it. We can't construct it all in this one little phase because right here, the bow of tote ship is there. So that's the majority of Terminal 2. Then there's this little subphase right here. We move tote into Terminal 2, and then in the next slide you can see that this little key right here was the last piece of Terminal 2, and we would slide tote back. And then the last phase we would take out Terminal 3, take out the temporary ramps, and there's another little fill right here that's yellow, is another little sliver fill that we would do with material from the north extension it kind of squares off the operational area for tote, gives them a little bit more operating room, but very inexpensive. I mean, and it's good use of that material that's there anyway. Last thing we do is construct a new POL2. Again, we're just extending the existing POL2 is this gray, and we would extend it out to get on a consistent berth line here. There's concept D is complete, and there is a view from the west. And now I'm going to hand it over to Lon Elledge. Essentially, all of these concepts will meet the needs of the port. They all do it in slightly different ways, but we felt we had to do a good job of looking at 3 and then evaluating them, and Ron's going to talk about the evaluation process.
Thanks, Doug. Good afternoon. In October, the last part of October, we published or issued a draft concept, 15% concept work plan. Once that had been provided to the port, we had a concept evaluation committee that had already been set up and arranged for. They convened in the last part of October, so I'd like to discuss that process. The Concept Evaluation Committee had 7 members. They included the municipality, the port, both Verizon, and the Pilot Association. The objectives, the factors, and the weights were predetermined prior to the committee being put in place. So the decision was just to score the different concepts. The factors we use, you can see, are 0 to 1. These were relative factors based on what the committee members' evaluation of the concepts were. This is the concept worksheet. Now, I know everybody probably jumped to the lower corner, but I want to talk about what went into the process. The objectives, you can see, they've been set prior to the charrette. Minimize the upfront costs, minimize life cycle costs, those two are directly cost related. Minimize future maintenance dredging, provide for the expansion in future phases, provide the least long-term cost impacts to the existing tenants, basically their operating costs over time, and to minimize the amount of additional costs to the operators during construction, least amount of operational impact to them or operational costs. In the measures, you can see how these were measured. Now, the weights were developed or refined during the charrette process, and the executive committee agreed to both the objectives, measures, and weights from the charrette to be used by the evaluation committee. So the scores themselves are relative. The members would discuss, for example, they would discuss costs, we would provide the cost information to them, and then the relative scores were low, medium, and high cost. And decisions were reached by consensus. So once all 7 agreed, then those scores were applied. Again, you can see that Concept A is a distant third. Concept C came in with a score of 51.2, and then Concept D had the highest score at 55.6. Another thing I'd like to point out, for example, on life cycle costs, you could have the same score for 2 concepts. If the committee felt that they had the same relative weight, they had the same score. So now I'd like to talk about the direct costs. We did perform a cost estimate as part of the report. We used the requirements for cost and schedule risk under the core, and then used crystal ball software to analyze it. And one of the things that this also does is it places contingency where risk seems to warrant it. Now, the confidence factors there, that's the confidence that you have that the project or program would come in at or under that cost. So in this case, you would be 60% confident, 80 or 100. And normally agencies use the 80% confidence factor to publish costs. So that's why we've highlighted that. Now, Concept D, for reasons I'll explain later, but Concept D ended up being the lowest cost no matter what confidence level you have. We anticipated 80% that it is $485 million. Now that's the $130 million that we currently have and an additional $355 million. And this is an out-the-door cost, so to speak. It is everything. It's construction design, project management. It is meant to capture as much of the project cost as we can. Again, this cost is based on our 15% concept. Some of the factors affecting the cost. We had to make some assumptions. We assumed the construction would start in 2016. We anticipated a 6-year construction period, so a construction midpoint of 2019, that allows you to factor in escalation. We also assumed full funding available at the start of construction, so there wouldn't be a need to sequence or phase or delay projects pending additional funds. There are things that we do need to further evaluate. We are currently updating the seismic study, site-specific seismic study. We're currently in discussions with the GAC on a seismic performance level and looking at how that will impact the project. And this fall, we plan on a test pilot program that will help refine the foundation requirements. So this cost estimate, I'll caution you, is not the final cost estimate. for the program, it is what, or for the project, it is what we know now, 15%. And these further studies would affect all three of the concepts equally. So it would not change the weighting, it would not change the scoring, it would just move that cost up or down equally for all three concepts. Yeah.
I have a question. Back when you were doing the scoring, this concept D had a higher cost to our major tenants, or it seemed to have more of an impact. Was that at all rolled into the cost?
No, this cost is strictly for the item number one, the upfront cost. But the discussions about, I think you're talking about item number 5?
Yes.
Yeah. They felt that there would be a slight adjustment, which I'll get to in a moment, of the backland areas, and they're not sure how that would affect them. So concept C leaves them exactly where they are now. So that to them is a little bit of a risk, and that's why they scored slightly lower.
Sorry, Mike, that I had to.
Oh, no, that's a good question. So again, I think this finishes the cost discussion. These again are the upfront costs. So Concept Evaluation Committee recommended that Concept D be accepted, and the municipality agreed to that. So now I would like to discuss the attributes of Concept D. Remind you again, back to what I said before, that some of these attributes are shared by more than one concept. But we talked about the upfront cost being the lowest. It also has the lowest, or among the lowest, life cycle costs. So it shares that actually with Concept C. Minimizes future maintenance dredging. As we said, it has moved out 140 feet. The other thing that we did is we realigned POL1 and POL2, working with the Corps to make sure that the current method of dredging with the hopper dredge could follow the berth line. And we actually adjusted POL1 and POL2 further out to make sure that it would be a clean dredging sweep. It does allow for future draft vessels by moving offshore. No construction of interim berths, and this has an effect on some other things. Everybody moves once. The only interim construction we have to do are the ramps for tote, and tote's final move is just an adjustment. So by having no interim berths, we end up with the shortest construction period. We end up with the least amount of tenant moves during construction, so the least impact to them. And this was very important to the port. This concept allows for 2 POL berths and a cement berth for the majority of the construction. There's only one phase, and we're trying to minimize that. We're going to get down to 1 POL berth. And that's critical because the cement vessel is there for an extended period of time, a week or longer, and it can impact the scheduling of the POL vessel. So I'm talking to the port operations, they wanted to minimize the time that we would only have 1 POL berth. And then, as Doug discussed, we provided additional acreage for the tenants by inexpensive fill along the shoreline. Obviously, by adjusting the tenants' area and their berths, we went back and we're working with them over how to set up their backland areas, their yards. So we had a planner come out, work with them, and we've discussed with them, and they are in agreement with this. What we wanted to do, first of all, was make sure that they were whole, that they didn't have any less area than they currently have. And you could see from the lease areas down here that tote goes from 39 to 40, almost 44 acres, and Horizon goes from almost 43 to almost 45. And they're much more of a compact yard area. And then they are direct access to their berths, Horizon for berth Terminal 1 and tote for Terminal 2. So this we feel is a very efficient operation. We've tried to hold the existing terminal line here as much as possible to minimize having to adjust to that. And one benefit we picked up in talking to Alaska Railway is there's an existing rail track here, double track, and we think for a minimum cost we can upgrade that with a lift carrier and provide on-port container operations so that both Tote and Horizon can take containers directly from their terminals back, put them on rail cars, and then the rail, Alaska Rail can take them off. And right now, that cargo goes out the gate around here on the city streets and then ends up being placed on cars there. If we can do it here, we save the handling and travel costs for the tenants, and also for Alaska Rail. They basically would be able to do that operation here and save their yard space. So we feel that this is a good lease area, and as I said, this has been worked over with the tenants.
Mr. Steele?
What happens with the north terminal in terms of the roll-off, roll-on capability for military deployments and that stuff?
The barge, the dry barge area is still there, and it will not be a pocket. It will be actually in line with the revised bank. And then this rail still has the capability of being extended down here. So the northern extension acreage is left is still available. It will be stable. There will no longer be any settlement issues. And it should not require any, the plan was is to leave it in condition that for the next 75 years it would be fine, because right now it is slowly.
Madam Chair, may I further clarify? So, in answer to your direct question, they'll still have and continue to have the roll-on, roll-off capability. They'll also continue to have the staging area, appropriate staging area to make that happen.
Do we use that staging area at times that they're not using it, or how?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
And is that their berth? They own it, we own it?
Well, so the reason I want to clarify is you had mentioned the north end, okay, and that's why he addressed the part about the barge. But typically, the roll-on, roll-off activity takes place on the terminals. Okay.
I'm sorry for any confusion.
Yeah,
Tow would still operate the same way they do now with roll-on, roll-off, and they would still be able to handle the military cargo the way they do now.
If I can just add one more point of clarification on that too. The deployment model for the Department of Defense has shifted from bringing their own vessels in and staging a bunch of stuff and loading up and leaving to integrating it as backhaul on commercial carriers. So for the last 2+ years, that's how we've seen deployments go. And Tote gets the lion's share of that business because the roll-on, roll-off vessel configuration is absolutely perfect for that. So they've been doing most of the backhaul for the military down to the lower 48.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was the purpose of that ramp, was that they could back up their landing craft vehicles or vessels and just run.
Well, there's more commercial use for those purposes. That's how all those wind turbines got out to Fire Island, out of that barge berth area with a landing craft type barge.
But we will not have the barge berth.
Yes, we will.
They'll
okay.
still be
Yeah,
over
that's
there.
staying
I'm
out
sorry.
there. You bet.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you had mentioned that we were going to upgrade the railroad tracks. Is that part included in the total estimate of cost, or is that the railroad's paying for that, or those funds are not known where they're coming from yet as of yet?
Yeah, just to be clear, the tracks themselves are, so what we'd be talking about adding is an asphalt apron alongside of it with a lift carrier.
Yeah, currently, we've been talking to the railroad. They're in the process of providing us a preliminary design of what they think would be a concept that would work well. Upside to this one here too is most of the track that they would need to make this happen is already there and usable. A little bit of additional would have to be added, and we still have leftover materials from the old project just staged, because in the old project the rail was supposed to go all the way out to the north end to the barge berth area. So we've got a lot of material already on hand to see this through the rest of the way. But I don't have a picture to show you. It's in the minds of the engineers over at the railroad, and once they've showed us what they're looking for, then we're debating whether or not we add it to this or have those discussions that you just mentioned. How do we share the cost of this? Because there's benefit to both of us. Yeah, we're a long way from covering that, but it's a growth out of this, And doing what we've done with the front end of the port gives us a lot of flexibility with what to do to the back end.
And for the record,
Steve Rebuffo, Port Director.
Mr. Shield.
Yes. Now, I assume from the discussion that we had that this concept, because we moved it out, does not have to have all that dredging and as much.
As much.
Because moving it out, you're moving it into a swifter current.
Yes.
So basically, the scouring effect is greater.
Take advantage of that. So I guess my concern is that across there, we're going to have to add some fill in there. Is that going to be sheet pile, or is that going to be just straight pile and compaction?
It's just
stuff?
fill with a riprap slope. We're not putting any more sheet pile behind the berth there. Yeah.
And the fill and the rock for the riprap will be recovered out of this area that we're removing there.
Any other questions? Okay, please continue.
So, as discussed, we have $130 million in available funds now, and we've developed a project critical path for the next, basically for 2016 on what we feel needs to be accomplished pending additional funds. So I'd like to talk about that now. And again, this is what we're looking at to do with the existing available funding. So the first two items, the completion of the concept design study and the test pile program for next fall, we're already underway to do that. As far as the test pile program, we're in the permitting process, the work plan process, and developing plans and specs, and we begin discussions with contractors on capabilities. So, and we're currently online to accomplish that. If we get the permits, of course, that's always a question. But late next year, towards the end of the construction season, probably starting in August or September. We discussed there are certain things we're still trying to resolve as far as seismic requirements, foundation requirements, so our concept to date has been looking at 3 different concepts, so we've kind of spread out our effort. So now we'd like to focus on just concept D, bring it up to a 30-35% design phase. And that is to develop the criteria to the point that we can turn it over to designer under contract with municipality to actually be the designer of record. CH will not be the designer of record for this. But we feel if we do this groundwork here, it will save time and effort for them. Permitting for the marine structures, we anticipate starting that next spring. Our HDR, our partner, is responsible for that. The first thing that we need to do, obviously, is relocate the port admin building to allow that construction to start on Terminal 1. Now, these procurement approaches I'm talking about, those are recommended for knowing what we know now. To be honest, they are my recommendation based on cost and risk. So we feel the building itself, the port building, admin building, could be a design build. It's effective, it's fairly quick and cost effective. We feel that the north extension with the issues out there, I think there's a significant amount of risk in identifying that construction technique, specifics of it. So we're going to, at this point, recommend a CMGC or CM at risk approach on that. We're talking to our construction manager about that. So those would be the first 2 procurements that we'd be looking at, is to procure the design building. We programmed the building early in 2015 and issue out a contract based on that programming, and then we follow up with the CMGC on the north extension. We do have enough funds, obviously, to build the building, and we think at least to do a significant proportion of the northern extension work. Then the marine structures, by moving them offshore, not putting them where the current structures are, they're basically in an area where there shouldn't be any obstructions, should be a clear construction site. So that reduces the risk of construction a lot. We'll know more after the pile driving test pile program, obviously, but I anticipate on that breaking it up into 2 packages based on the type of structures and when we're going to actually build them. The POL cement terminals is one package, and then the container terminals 1 and 2 is the other package. And as a more of a typical design bid build approach, I think it'd be the most cost-effective way of doing it.
This might be a naive question, but did you look into the current building that you're now using as your facility for the Port Administrative Offices,
Did we?
as opposed to building a new one?
Well,
It's all in the same area.
Yeah, it's all on the same apron, it's all on the same footprint, so that entire building, including the warehousing functions, they have to be moved.
I think what she was asking is just moving the port admin building down the road.
Right, that's what I was asking.
As opposed to building a new one.
Right.
Could you pick it up and move it? I think that's the question.
Yeah, I don't think so, but we'll be glad to go around and put it out.
Well, you know, it was an extension added after the fact to the end of that warehouse. Yeah, so one whole side of it's kind of missing.
Right.
On the port admin facility, it looks like you're putting it roughly where the security facility is now.
Across the street.
Across the street.
Yeah, behind it, security's right there.
Yeah.
And we'd be putting it behind.
That's warehousing as well.
We would anticipate right now that we've staked out an area that would have to include parking, have to include the port admin building, port admin functions themselves, and also offices for us and any other port contractors. And then it's possible that current port maintenance facility right here could be utilized by Horizon for the crane maintenance facility, in which case we would also create a function for them over there.
And I know you guys have thought of this. Is there a particular reason you didn't put the port admin building up on top and provide access, non-secure access to it for the public?
Well, we've looked at that in the past, and it can be fairly expensive. There's a view shed buffer on the top of the bluff that pushes a building down a bit, and so you're developing on a slope that's contaminated. You have slope stability contamination issues. We think it's a lower cost proposition to put the building down here, but that could be evaluated as we get into the requirements of that building.
No need to build a contaminated slope. I'm just asking.
Yeah, but no, we did have a concept at one time for a bigger facility up at the top. It's quite expensive.
Mr. Steele?
We have used in the past the warehouse space for things like the commission of the anchorage and various activities, cruise ship, hospitality, or whatever.
And we've also leased it out.
So, is there going to be space for that at some point? Is that up by the admin building? Is that where it would be, down on the port?
We haven't looked specifically. We
That type of
really
space,
only looked
yeah.
at those functions we know we absolutely have
And we
to
can get-
address, and we're limited on available acreage to keep Toad and Horizon whole on their operating area. So we really tried to zero in on that first.
And to keep the cost down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a big discussion.
Yeah, well, rightfully so. But just in terms of thinking of options for the future, and in terms of moving out to the 45-foot level draft, did we do any research on that item for the last iteration that we did here? And is some of that material, some of those studies available such that we can, the amount we have to do is less than
Well,
full-blown?
the original project, the port expansion project, was going beyond that level. Then the last concept design study, we were looking at berths in the same area. So we really only evaluated on a kind of a qualitative basis.
We still need to do the detail.
There may be further design development that needs to be done on that, but we.
We would anticipate there being some coastal work. We've been talking to about getting the modeling from the Corps for flow in the area, and we have actually HCR has a ice expert that's already involved in looking at the ice flow and for that location.
Any other questions? Oh, oops.
You mentioned permitting for marine structures. Are we going to need permits for building permits for from the feds or anyone else besides for the marine structures, or?
Well, there's a list of who we're going to need permits from.
Okay.
It includes the Corps. NEMS is a major one, obviously with the fisheries, primarily the beluga whales and the impact on them. We've been in talks with the municipality for permitting for the buildings themselves. But primarily, I think the two federal permits, speaking out of turn, is the Corps and then the Coast Guard, I believe, has a say because we are changing the navigational alignment slightly. So we've already done a permitting plan that lists all the permits agencies we have to contact. We've already had a pre-application meeting with them regarding the test pile program.
Since we're ultimately with this design going to save the Corps of Engineers some money in terms of dredging, because we'll be out in 45-foot level and theoretically we'll be able to take advantage of the natural flow. They ought to contribute something to our effort. So
Nice try, Steele. They've already spent a fortune fixing our problems.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We won't even discuss much.
All right.
They hear this. Before you go,
So really, we just want to conclude at this point by, summarizing that we've laid out the process, the concept design process that we undertook here from the concept planning charrette through the concept evaluation committee as a very thorough and credible process, and we work closely with our stakeholders through it. For that reason, we feel confident that concept D is the best concept to move forward with. And we build support with our stakeholders through this process, and we believe it can be successfully executed with the required permits and funding. So with that, we open it up to any other questions you might have.
Are there any other questions?
One more. Was the Port Commission involved in the waiting, or have they been involved in the process here in the last?
Well, we did not have representatives from the Port Commission on the concept evaluation committee, but Brad Kroon from Cook Inlet Tug and Barge was certainly a stakeholder in the charrette process.
So they're hearing it for the first time at this point?
Yeah, we have not briefed the Port Commission on this report.
Mr. Flynn?
I may pull a couple members of the audience real quickly. Mr. Lowry?
Yeah, well, it's thumbs up from our perspective. We've been very involved in this entire process as has been described, and it's been a complete 180, I would say, over the process in the past, which is a good thing from our perspective. And the whole group's been very attentive to our needs, even from the end product and through the process of construction. So we're very supportive and very appreciative of the entire process and all those involved.
Do we have anybody here from Horizon/Madison? I don't see him. All right. Quick announcement, Madam Chair, your operating and capital budget amendments are on the clerk's table behind us as you leave. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Unless there's any other questions, adjourn.